Hi, Jerht Santos here of the Coach PH. Remember to click the subscribe button to be updated with our latest videos.
Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. Today we have a very special guest. Edmund is the president and CEO of Caylum Trading Institute, the premier educational facility in the Philippines that aims to develop successful traders of global equity markets. He is a CFA charter holder, a graduate of the Master of Science in Global Finance program from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology Business School, and he has been a student of the international markets for more than a decade, spanning countries from the United States, Hong Kong, and China, Japan, Indonesia, and of course, the Philippines. Prior to establishing Caylum, he worked as a research analyst for CEO Financial, the leading online stock brokerage firm in the country. Welcome, Edmund, to our show.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks, Jerht.
Edmund, I'd like to ask you a few questions to kind of get into your brain and how you think as a successful trader, okay? So my first question is, how did you get introduced to the financial markets? Can you remember what year was that?
That's been such a long time ago, Jerht. I mean, we were playing bowling in college, and actually it never crossed my mind. I think siguro maswerte rin ako because the family has been in the brokerage business for maybe the last 30, 40 years, right? So when I graduated, you want to take life seriously. And I graduated, and then you were looking for a job. Then I think there was only one company that gave me a job offer. It was a U.S. company for applying for a research analyst. So I think fortunately, like my dad also knew yung founder and the owner of that company, that U.S. company. So I went there, learned more about picking stocks, and I was in charge of the technology, media, and telecommunication sector. We call it the TMT sector at that time. And we were picking stocks, and we were looking at all these. And the technology sector is so broad, diba? So I remember at the time, like I was in charge of looking at RIM. RIM is Blackberry at that time, and RIM was like $160 stock. We had a price target of over $190, right? And that stock price fell over to $7 per share, right? And like I was like, this is amazing, right? How can this company used to be the largest how is it, largest percentage of ownership in the Toronto Stock Exchange, because if you talk about Canada, it's only Blackberry at that time. So I saw what could happen, and I saw what could be when you're wrong. So I think that was also a great, and we were research analysts and we were fundamentals, and you're making calls that's no 90%. Ang hirap nun. So I that was my first taste siguro of the equity market before moving to COL. And obviously after COL, everything has been, a great learning experience to where I am today also.
Great. Interesting story, And I think in prior interviews you mentioned that it was Apple who was kind of, the game changer in that industry, why research in motion fell, so much. Is that right?
Yeah, that was a big surprise at that time, right? And the funny part was BlackBerry was growing at what, 40-50%, yet the stock price was falling almost 40%, and we didn't know what was happening because we always felt that there was room for multiple winners in this industry, diba? Rather than like Apple surpassing. We expected Apple to surpass it, but we thought both would survive.
Right.
Eventually, hindi nga nabuhay, diba? Now BlackBerry has to pivot and to change business direction the next 10, 15 years.
Yes, and there was actually a trend here that most people had Blackberries. Diba? Parang who would have thought that would happen?
Yeah. Time flies.
In other interviews, your brother Lawrence once mentioned that trading started out as a job, right? Was it the same for you, Edmund? At what point did you realize that stock trading is something that you were really passionate about?
No, I fell in love at first sight, if you wanna call that.
Wow.
Just right off the bat, I maybe because he interned for a long period of time, my brother, with my dad, right? I didn't go through that same experience. I was just having fun in college and high school. So when I got to the job, and then I saw what could happen. Like I always tell people my story when I got my first trading account. I was at 21. Unfortunately, my dad's backing me up. So, I mean, fortunately, diba? I mean, not everybody has that, I mean, backing or opportunity like I did, right? And he allowed us to make mistakes. So I think that was like very fortunate. I mean, how many people could make ₱1,000,000, right? 3 months after 3 to 6 months after graduating, diba? And then lose it all the next month. So I lost even more the following month. And in fact, I still have a ledger of that. That's how funny it is, right? Because I mean, the funny thing is because we didn't know where to start. All my dad gave me was this book, was Trend Trading for a Living by Thomas Carr. Tapos sabi niya, "O, bahala ka na, kaya mo na yan." Right? So we were going through that experience. Wala, everything was just and Trend Trading for a Living by Thomas Carr only had one setup. It was just a simple pullback. They call it the Holy Grail. Right. So that's the only thing I was doing when I first graduated, just looking for an uptrend, looking for a pullback, and then yun. I mean, that's it. And that setup till today, I mean, that's still how we describe majority of other setups, just by that simple pullback setup that I read 11, 12 years ago. And the funny part is, like, you made so much money because the market was doing well. You thought marunong ka, and then the next month, nag-correct ang market. Kala mo pullback, yung pala malalim na, tas doon ka tatamaan, right? So I think what was key was that I saw what was possible rather than trying to focus on all the losses that happened that following month, right? And then, well, sky was the limit after. I mean, I could see how the sky was the limit and how people could have made so much opportunity in the stock market. I mean, you only read about these two people, I mean, at the back of my screen, and you have Jesse Livermore, you have Warren Buffett, diba?
Yeah.
I mean, I have both of them at the back, and I mean, they have so much experience that sometimes, even if you read about it, you don't understand it until you go through it yourself, diba?
Right.
So I think that's the good part.
And it's a very, very interesting thing that your dad did, no? Parang I noticed nga that he allowed you to make those mistakes. Lawrence once shared that he was in cash and then he switched to COL. He was buying and then your dad was selling. I mean, in hindsight, I'm sure you were kind of grateful for that experience, that it wasn't like spoon-fed, no? Na parang, oh, don't do this, don't do that. It was more of you learn on your own.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think my father gave us guidance naman. But at the end of the day, it's your call, right? So there's only so much you can do in terms of guidance, right? And especially at that time, everything's informal. Wala naman formal training. Alam mo naman, dad ko, I mean, everything just at the top of it, on top of his mind, and then he'll just blurt it out. Diba? Rarely is it structured. Rarely is it in proper format. So it's very difficult for an individual person to comprehend right off the bat. But there's so much wealth of knowledge. Diba? So I think that's the nice part. I mean, they let us go through those mistakes and try to make it small mistakes. But, you have a high risk appetite when you're young. And don't commit the same mistakes over and over again. And then he always tells us, as long as you survive, that's what he wants. Because he's seen it with his own traders back in the day, right? He always tells people, I mean, to teach a person how to swim, you need to throw them in the swimming pool, right? And then he'll find a way to float, right? That was always his thinking, because eventually you don't know how to swim. You'll learn how to swim kasi ano na yan eh. Life or death na yan eh, diba? But little does he know, I mean, we changed that total mindset today. We don't look at it from that perspective anymore. Before, okay lang. But we realized that many people apparently die. Hindi pala marunong lumangoy talaga, namatayin talaga. And some give up and die. So we had to change that entire mindset. But that was how we were built back in the day.
Right. It's something that you really can't shortcut. Parang everything can be shortened. The learning curve can be shortened. But experience, like what you went through, that's priceless. You really can't.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
Can you share why you chose to focus on stock trading over investing?
I'm probably best of both worlds, right? The reason why, it's because, I mean, if you look at my background, it's all about long-term. So financial analyst, I mean, I have those 3 letters at the end of my name not for the next 5 minutes or the next one day, right? It's really for long-term naman talaga, right? So I guess, like, in my background, you could say that looking for cheap companies and looking at a long-term horizon has always been in my DNA, right? I mean, I try to look at stuff from a bigger picture all the time, right? And then that was, I mean, how I did my investing also back in the day, right? Until you go through a period. I mean, I was with EDC. EDC was such a cheap company. I don't even think, like, people who came in the last 2-3 years know about EDC. EDC is a first-gen subsidiary, and it was listed, and we were buying it because it was so cheap. And for the next 4 years, it stayed at the same price till today. Right? And then I realized, ano pa long term natin dito, diba? I mean, and don't get me wrong, if you held it, you would have made money kasi umakyat naman to 7 pesos by the time the tender offer came about. Right? But the length and the time for it to be realized, you could see that there were so much missed opportunities in between. Right? So, I mean, that's the reason why we had to, how would I put it? Put it like into a weighing scale where there's, I mean, timing at the end of the day is still important. But we look at all angles, from fundamentals to technicals, even what market conditions are. And that's why the FTSR framework was born.
Right. I remember EDC parang was trading at 6 pesos when I started, and then it was the kind of dead money. Parang no one would have known that you would have a
and then every year there was a typhoon that would shut down the plant. I mean, like how I don't want to describe it, but it was ridiculous because there's typhoons every year. And every time there was a typhoon, that power plant would shut down every year. Because so every year may gap down kang 30%. Kasi bad news yun, sarado yung plant, diba?
Yeah. And so Edmund, what was your first trade and how did it go? Was it before you were your first job or was it after?
Well, I mean, when you're young, when I was young, I had a small account naman, and then we just participate in all these IPOs. I mean, I have a record of, let's say, like I remit on the IPO. I still have that. I mean, that long. I mean, I don't have the shares. I mean, that was, I don't remember like the first exactly trades, but I do remember like the notable ones in my career, right? I mean, like the first really headache that came to me was with the AGI. I mean, I've shared this many times with other people. And that stock, I mean, I had a great thesis on it because I was a research analyst already for CUL, right? And we looked at AGI and none of its subsidiaries were listed except for MegaWorld, right? And then when we look at the business model for AGI, it had so much potential to unlock value with Emperador, Resorts World, and McDonald's at that time. Right. And our thesis was that as they unlock those values through IPO, AGI would have gone up. Right. So, and AGI did go up. Right. It went from 4 to 13 pesos. But by the time I saw it, it was like I was trying to wait for a pullback. I couldn't find a way for a pullback. Right. And then I ended up buying at 10 pesos, I believe. Right. And then like I bought so much that was 150% leveraged because my target was 30 pesos at that time. That's how crazy it was. Meaning I felt it was still going to go up like 2 or 3 times because just on the unlocking of the value, right? So I was overloaded on AGI. And then, but 1 month later, they announced that they were doing a place out where they were raising capital at 9 pesos per share. And that stock price from 10, I think, got down to 9.
Yeah.
Right. So indirectly, I was down like what? That was just like a 15% decline in share price. But I was over levered and I was down like 25% of my account. And then chairman comes in and then he was laughing. Right? Ano, di mo na kaya mag-cut, no? Right? Susuka ka na, no? So I was in that moment. So, sige na, susuka na ako. Kasi hindi mo na makat eh. I mean, you're so over levered and so heavy in that stock and you're down and then it's so difficult to cut. Right? So I mean, not luckily. I mean, I got out of that trade at 8.50 or $9 per share. And then lo and behold, year and a half later, it hits 36 pesos. Right? Because they did everything that we predicted, right? They went IPO with Travelers, RWM. They went IPO with Emperador in the next 2 years and boom, AGI was 36 pesos per share. And then I didn't expect, like, if you look at it from 10 years later, or even today's price, AGI is what? 10 pesos? What's the price today? 11? Ito yung price na sumuka ako eh. Right? And it went down to as low as 6 or 7 during the pandemic. Diba? I never imagined that 10 years later, right, I was laughing about it because I didn't imagine 10 years later that AGI would actually go below the price where I sold it. Right? But that's how market timing works. And that's why I always tell people why market timing is so important. right? I mean, it's a lifetime skill. Don't get me wrong.
For that trade, no, your thesis was right, but in terms of the timing, that's something that it's really out of our hands. The thesis was right of unlocking the value, but you can't predict, right, when that will happen or if that will happen, right?
Well, look at it from this angle also. I mean, we all have theses, right? But sometimes they don't pan out. So I mean, hindsight, looking back at hindsight, yes, my thesis did pan out. But how many times have you made a call about a certain company and it didn't come to fruition also? Diba? So I mean, that's the gamble that's a probability that we all have to take, right? So the only thing that can like limit or seguro like control our at the end of the day is still risk management. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the trade, but you manage your position properly. And that's why risk management is at the base of our FTSR, because risk management obviously for us is the most important.
Totally agree with that.
In the next video, we will talk about lessons from profitable stock market traders.
You mentioned that you started journaling your trades in 2009. How important was that in the way you developed as a trader?
If you have any questions in this video, please feel free to comment below. Thank you for watching. Click the subscribe button and see you on our next video. God bless you.